7. Seven?
Yeah.
I'm gone for 3 weeks, and this is what...
Yeah, it has fallen apart. Chris, you rolled a 7. That means the topic we'll be discussing today is... What do you do when you're just not feeling motivated to run a role-playing game?
It's a timely topic.
Hello, and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion in which we talk about different topics related to running role-playing games. My name is Andy Rao.
And my name is John Corey.
And today we are joined by a special guest. He has been out for quite a few weeks doing, I'm not sure exactly what, but I've heard he might be running a game of Rollmaster for 3 former presidents of the United States. So with that introduction, let me welcome Chris Salzman back to the show.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back on as a guest this time. Yeah, I have not been running Rollmaster for 3 former presidents. I can't say what I have been doing with 3 former presidents.
Okay.
So you were half right, Andy.
Yeah, Chris was, you may recall, Chris was booted from the show a couple of weeks ago for his just terrible attitude. And we're giving him a chance to get back into our good graces.
We'll see how this goes, Salzman.
Okay.
Yeah. I see John has his little checklist of that he can take notes on Chris's behavior all ready to go. Okay, well, guys, more seriously, but not much more seriously. Okay. This is the part of the show where I'm going to ask each of you guys to tell me what has been going on gaming-wise in your lives. Chris, you, I know, have been out caring for a baby, so I don't know if any gaming stuff has been going on. John, why don't we start with you? What has been going on? What have you been doing gaming-wise lately?
A couple of things. I bought some games, but that's pretty much any time. And between the last time we spoke and the time we're speaking now, I've probably bought a game. I bought actually a couple of books that I'm interested in. One is the Ultimate RPG Role-Playing Game Guidebook by James D'Amato. And I loved One Shot Podcast and Campaign and listened to them for years. Okay. So I hadn't listened in a while and was excited to see he had written a book. It seems like a combination of basics, like here's how you start a role-playing game, and advanced stuff. So I've just started it, but I already like his attitude already. So that's fun. But another game called Liminal that I have not cracked open. And I just got an email today that some Kickstarter I backed 6 months ago I'd forgotten about had just shipped to me. So that's good news.
Hey, wow. Only 6 months ago?
Yeah, I know, right?
It's quick.
Yeah. And then I did play this morning, actually. I played in my friend Steve's game, which is my friend Steve's Nameless Game. It's a game we're sort of making up as we go. It is a role-playing game. It's more like a story game, and the game is to try to figure out the game. It's one of those games where you've woken up, you don't know where you are, but you suddenly are starting to develop these abilities to let you do things. And so it's been really interesting, and it's fun. I'm playing that with another former guest, Jess Snyder, is in that game.
Yeah. Does Steve know where the game is going?
I think so.
Okay.
I trust Steve. Steve was my GM for years in a 3.5 campaign, so I trust him to lead me somewhere fruitful. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Is the gimmick that it always turns out that the game you're playing is Aliens?
That would be great, but no, sadly.
It's Andy's dream game.
That's right, because how do I get in on this?
Yeah, right.
So, hey, John, you mentioned you were reading that guide to gaming, and I don't know about you guys. I personally can count on, like, one hand the number of books about role-playing that I've read, like general advice type books about role-playing, which probably is very obvious if you listen to the show. But so can you tell us a little bit more about the one you're reading, John? Is it like how to run and play in a role-playing game, or is it a little different than that?
It does have an intro section where it assumes you don't know what a role-playing game is, but it assumes that you want to learn what one is. It's a general audience book with an advanced section later. James D'Amato has an interesting background in that he did 2 things which I think make him really qualified to write this book. One is he ran a podcast, and still does, called One Shot, where every month he learns a new game and then they play it over sessions. So he's played, dozens and dozens of RPGs. His other background is he's a trained improv comedian. He trained at Second City in Chicago. So he really likes doing improv type stuff with his games. So I think it's a combination of general advice on how to play well and also how to get more comfortable with character and improv and all those kind of things that we all struggle with as role players.
Does he have a sort of guiding philosophy or a specific angle from which he's approaching this topic?
There's sort of two things he made clear very early in the book, and I'm not done with it yet. But one is RPGs are great because everyone's a player, even the GM's a player, and don't forget that. And two, RPGs aren't like other forms of storytelling because the fun is in telling the story together, not the story you tell. That is his fundamental attitude. So it's not about coming up with a great story. It's about having fun while you're telling the story.
Okay.
How does
sounds really interesting.
Does he square that with actual play podcasts? So I know it's something like we've talked about before on the show. Like sometimes you listen to an actual play podcast and it just sort of bounces off you. Like, it's just like, that's not very interesting. But really the people who are doing it and recording it are having fun. So there's like this mixture of like they're having fun, but then they're also sort of producing something that's enjoyable for other people.
And I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. I would assume he does, though I don't know that because he's done hundreds of hours of actual play. Yeah. And he's really good at it. So it would be kind of a shame if he didn't get there, but we'll see. It's not focused around that. It's focused around role-playing in general, but I think it'll come up probably.
As we've discussed before, I'm not the hugest fan of actual play podcasts, but one of the podcasts I do enjoy listening to is that one associated with him. It's not One Shot. They have like a campaign podcast as well. And for a good while, they may still be doing it. They were running Star Wars, and I thought that was a very fun show to listen to.
It was great, and I probably listened to 40 episodes of that show. It was good. They got a little too silly for me. They got too much into the improv comedy. There was a point where I think Kat, the GM, was trying to drive the story forward, and they immediately all just dropped into shtick trying to avoid it, and I was like, okay, enough.
That's right. That'll be another topic, a topic we'll put on the table for a future episode.
Absolutely.
Is how John doesn't like fun.
That's right. John's problem with fun. What is the deal with John?
Yeah.
What is it with GMs and wanting to drive the story forward?
That's right. All right, so Chris, we're going to turn the eye of our focus over to you now. So picture sort of the eye of Sauron rotating to spotlight you. And what have you been up to while you've been out allegedly having a baby?
Yeah, well, I did not have the baby. My wife did. I've been helping to take care of the baby and our other child. So I started, and I don't know if I got a chance to talk about it on the podcast or not. I am really interested in running a cyberpunk campaign. It's sort of my next thing that I want to do. So I chatted with some former guests and some other friends and stuff and got a big reading list together. So I've gotten as far as to order the giant stack of cyberpunk related books and stuff. And that's just sitting there kind of taunting me. I've opened up, I think it's Cyberpunk 2nd edition or something like that, and flipped through it a little bit. Have Shadowrun as well. But I'm excited to do that, and I think I need to just dive in and go for it. Otherwise, I will get so far into the prep side of it that I'm just never going to run this thing. So hopefully by the end of 2020, I'll have started and maybe actually run part of that campaign.
That would be good. It's hard to say with a baby. Your baby could be 3 and you could still be like, I'm going to get there. Totally, it's going to happen. Yeah.
Who wants to play?
Is it your thought that you are going to run one of those specific games that you picked up? Or do you just want to immerse yourself in cyberpunk?
Yeah, I think like you and I have talked about it a little bit, not on the podcast, but like I think I want to run kind of my own thing with that. So reading a bunch of those books just to kind of get an idea of flavor and maybe some avoid some design problems that I'd probably run straight into head first. But otherwise, I'm not like super interested in running Shadowrun 3rd edition or whatever. So we'll see. The other thing that I might do is...
say out loud what edition of Shadowrun you're thinking about running. It's just an endless stream of emails from the internet.
That's right. I'm already starting to write my angry email to you guys. So.
Yeah. Well, in my research, I found that there's actually no edition of Shadowrun that anyone likes. So but yet, apparently, people play this game. Yeah, so there's the Cyberpunk 2077 game is coming out pretty soon, and there's a RPG update to it as well. So there's like a beginner's box that's associated with that. So probably I'll just grab that and run that.
I think I saw in your stack you also had an old 90s game, Cyberpunk 2020.
Yes.
I believe. Okay, so I'm not recommending that game, but I am recommending creating a character in that game because it's crazy. Like it is crazy, and I won't spoil it. Maybe next time you're on, you describe that experience. It's charts and tables, and it's like you roll. It's great. It's fantastic. Yeah. So give it a shot sometime.
Yeah, like I'm kind of interested in that part of it. Especially some of these games. Like it's fun to me to think about playing a game in 2020 that was written back in the 80s or whatever, that was set in 2020 as like this far future.
Yeah.
There's something that I find just hilarious about that and really interesting narratively, right? Like, because it's you have this like retrofuturism sort of thing going on, but at the same time it's like, I don't know, the world's already a hellscape, so it's like it's like we've seen some of these like these concepts of like what capitalism is going to do in 30 years and come to fruition. Right. Yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of what I've been doing, and then otherwise I've been playing this game called Slay the Spire on iOS recently, which is a really good like roguelike deck building game, which is a lot of genre sort of stuff thrown together, but it's a very like evocative setting and kind of silly too. But that's been sort of my one gaming outlet while I'm holding a baby. So
awesome.
Yeah, I've played Slay the Spire. I put a lot of hours into it as well, and I have to echo it. It's a wonderful game. Every time I play it, save and quit my game, my thought is like, how can this be a tabletop like physical game? Like, how can we make this into a cool RPG deck building hybrid game of some sort that I can get my hands on, because it's so fun.
Yeah. What about you, Andy? What have you been doing?
I guess that leaves me. Just a couple things. One book that I've been reading, I picked up a little while ago, a book called Champions Now. Mm-hmm. It is an interesting RPG book.
Is it written by the original Champions guy, isn't it?
So it's written by Ron Edwards, who is most well known for being a leading figure in the indie game movement in, I think, the late 90s and early 2000s. And I think a lot of the really influential early indie games grew out of the kind of an online environment in which he was often sort of guiding the discussions.
That's the Forge, maybe, is what.
Yes, the Forge. That's exactly it. I wasn't really an active participant in that community, but
I've heard.
But I sort of gained a certain respect for it just from a distance, from seeing the games that it produced. It's an interesting book. He is I hate this word, but he is kind of a controversial person in that he has ideas about how role-playing games work and how they should work that people disagree with, like vehemently, agree with and disagree with vehemently. In my book, that makes him a really interesting person to read, because I like kind of meaty, provocative ideas like that. What Champions Now is him taking one of the early and most influential superhero role-playing games, Champions, which I think was born in the 80s. And he is
the box set. Yep,
he is offering his spin on Champions. So Champions Now is a full role-playing game. Like the book contains the full rules you need to run a role-playing game. And they are recognizably the rules of one of the early Champions edition. But what makes it compelling and interesting is that they are just wrapped in a lot. It's like getting a really verbose director's commentary for an RPG, which is something I not really thought about before, but I love reading it. So like half the book is the game rules, but it's completely interspersed with like basically essays and manifestos on how to approach the task of running like a superhero role-playing game. And it's not just generic, it's not that same GM advice that is in every role-playing book. It's specific to running superhero role-playing games, and it's opinionated in the sense of like there's a right way to do this. And I've gone on too long about this already, but the thing that is really landing with me from this is, and I'm not done reading through it, is he is just arguing very forcefully for GMs and players together to take their games seriously, and then to truly take ownership of the kind of world and the stories they're creating.
Interesting.
In the context of a superhero role-playing game, he wants you not to worry about existing superhero franchises. He doesn't want you thinking about what Marvel or DC is doing, what the trends in comics are. He wants you and your players to think, but mostly you, the GM, because you're presenting to your players. He wants you to think, what do I love about this setting? And he wants you to just really specifically. He wants you to write down those things that you love or that you believe, and he wants you to like very intentionally build your game around it. And I don't know if I'm conveying it real well, but it's just kind of like a big wake-up call telling me whatever genre you're running, this is your game. Mm-hmm. Your responsibility is just to you and your players to like do what you want with your game. You don't need to abide by the canon of any setting. Just find what's fun and then just double down on that. And I don't know. It's been an inspiring book to read. So, I mean, I do recommend it. Its utility is definitely less if you have no interest in running a role-playing game. But some of the advice is, a lot of it is certainly applicable.
It sounds kind of like creating like a vision board for your game.
Yeah.
Almost, right? Like in not like a jokey way, right? Like actually like sitting down and being like, this is sort of what I want it to be. And that's okay that it can be this serious thing that we're doing together. Yeah.
Part of that is it's that idea of just taking this seriously. I do feel that over the years, as I've grown older, I've found myself at more of a remove from the game. Mm-hmm. And I think there is something to be said for like, hey, if we are going to engage in this multi-hour social activity, let's get into it. Mine this for mine it for whatever you can get out of it and take it seriously, which is a little scary to think about, but kind of exciting at the same time.
It's kind of exciting from my attitude, yeah. I mean, I'm the guy who's tried to run several superheroes games, and none of them went because I really couldn't find a group who wanted to take it seriously. I remember one game, a friend was like, yeah, let's play, that'll be fun, and we did it, and then he made his guy was like a photocopy machine that matter surfed on sheets of paper or something. Like he just wanted to make fun of it, and I wanted to take it very seriously. We were much younger at the time, but getting a supers game with a good tone off the ground is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. It's like, do you want to be the Watchmen? Yeah. Or do you want to be the Fantastic Four, like Golden Age?
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's all over the place. One other thing I'm kind of picking up from the game is he's a big believer in not coming to the table with like a set story in mind. So like he would not, for instance, I don't think he purchases Paizo's Adventure Path.
I like this guy already. You sold me on this book.
I mean, he, to the extent that's possible, he wants the experience to grow organically out of what the players give you. So the players have to take this seriously too, because it's their job in creating their character to tell the GM really specifically, here's the kind of fun I want to have. And then the GM just is supposed to start there, not with their own epic plot ideas. So anyway.
I love that.
Yeah, I did want to mention one other thing. I've played a bunch of games of BattleTech with my young son
over
the last couple of days. So that's been kind of fun. It's not exactly RPG, but it's there's a BattleTech role-playing game, and it's just, that's a game that lives somewhere in between role-playing game and war game. So that's been kind of fun.
Have you won every time?
I have lost every single time.
Okay.
Yes.
On purpose?
Yes.
Good man.
The gloves will come off, but not quite yet. So
not till he's hooked, Andy. Come on, you gotta be smart
exactly.
about this.
Once, you
have to wait for him to say, "Dad, I want you to try this time."
That's right.
Then you pull out the real BattleTech character sheet.
Well, that is literally what's going to happen, because we're playing with like the beginner rules, which have this really simplified version. I can't wait for the day when it's like, son, it's time for you to learn about flanking
and weapons overheating and
weapons overheating. Yes. We have gone on for a good while, but I think it's probably time for us to kind of circle back to our topic. So the topic that Chris, you rolled was, what do you do when you're just feeling unenthused about running a game? And maybe I can start by just asking you guys a softball question here. Have you ever been unenthused about running a role-playing game?
Well, so the answer is yes, but also I'll ask, is it running it or is it preparing it that's the where you're lacking motivation, or are those not the same thing to you? So I guess that's my question back.
That's a great question, and it's possible that if I had read the question correctly, I might be able to answer that. But why don't carry on, John? Though, tell us a little bit about that distinction.
Well, I found that, one of the reasons I've sort of switched to a lower prep method is that I'm always up for running a game. I am much less frequently up for doing a lot of prep. But we have friends, and you've had guests on this show, who will prep all day and then, maybe aren't that excited about running, or they're excited to do both things. But I think I ran into a prep dilemma at some point in my role-playing career and decided that the lack of motivation was getting the game together. And that's where I lost my motivation.
Is that something that, forgive me for oversimplifying this, is that something that when you had that realization, you fixed it and the problem went away?
Yeah, actually.
Right.
Not to oversimplify, but yeah, I realized that what I was doing was playing the wrong type of game. And that's why I wasn't having fun, and that's why I wasn't motivated.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
So, Chris, let's just bounce it over to you. Tell us about a time, if there has been such a time, when you just weren't feeling excited about running or prepping a game.
Oh goodness, yeah. Well, see the last 4 months, right? Yeah, it's been, the transition to online games was pretty hard for me, because it's I had a lot going on. I was changing jobs. I had a kid come in, so there's that all happening, and then pandemic stuff. So the thought of organizing and getting everybody together and playing a game and stuff was just too much. But I think what helped was sort of farming off some of the the scheduling duties and stuff. So this sounds like such a basic thing, but players stepping up to help get things scheduled was really helpful. But then also just lowering my standards for prep. Exactly what you're saying, John, was you know what, this is just going to be sort of by the book, or we're just going to do kind of this thing, and this is the only thing I prepped. And if we go outside those bounds, I might not have anything, but I'll improv it, or whatever. Like that. So that's been pretty freeing, that way. So that's what I've done recently when I'm not feeling motivated. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, well, that all rings really true for me as well. I've definitely felt unenthused, and as for why, it's varied from time to time. There's been times where just for whatever reason too much was going on in my life and I didn't feel like I had the energy to put into doing this. There were times where I felt like the game wasn't going all that well. I wasn't feeling a lot of enthusiasm from the players. And my instinct in that sort of thing is to look to the players to see if I can be enthused by them, if that makes sense. So if there are players, there's always one or two people that just have a vast reservoir of excitement about the game. And so when this has hit me, when possible, I try to just interact with those people that are most excited about the game, because chances are they've been thinking about the game and looking forward to it, and they have some thoughts about it. And I find that it usually doesn't take too much I just need a little bit of that energy and enthusiasm from them to get back on track. That said, that's not always possible. And sometimes you just show up at a game and you kind of got to make yourself go, get in the car and pack up your stuff in the car and go and just do it. And I usually find that once it gets going, it goes fine. But I'm reminded of a topic we talked about a very long time ago on this show. We talked about just GM stress and anxiety. Do you remember that episode?
Oh, yeah.
Episode.
And I don't think that feeling unexcited about running a game is exactly the same as feeling stressed or anxious about it, but they're certainly related.
I would agree. Because I think, like Chris, I had a lot of trouble getting excited or interested in online gaming, and I finally just had to run a game online. I think that we talked about this last time. And then now I feel I could do it. But I definitely was unmotivated to run my game because I didn't want to figure out all this online stuff. And I think that was, definitely a prep issue, another prep issue, right? So, yeah, I would agree.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good point.
It was fun to hear how enthusiastic you were about that online game you ran, John. That was fun. That was kind of inspiring just to hear about a gaming experiment like that actually went really well.
Yes, and that was good. And now I'm more excited to get my campaign going again and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was definitely I think that was a motivation issue, and I think those can take different forms. I think that's sort of the prep motivation stuff. What about actually running a game? Have either of you had a problem where it's time to run it, you've done your prep, and you're like, oh, I can't, for whatever reason?
Yeah, I usually push through. I mean, I kind of as we're talking, I'm just reminded a lot of public speaking in general, right? Everything we've said, I mean, you could just replace running a game with giving a speech, right? It's just I'm not ready for it. I don't want to do it, what have you, all that sort of stuff. So it seems sort of whatever you would do for getting motivated to do a speech somewhere, that's what you should do to get ready to run a game. Right. Yeah, I've definitely had times where I'm it's a half an hour before this game is going to start. It's I don't want to be doing this tonight, but I trust that it will be fun. is sort of
Yes.
the concept, right? Because like, again, I always go back to like, I'm playing a game with my friends, right? Like this is not a job. This is an optional activity. If we are not having fun for whatever reason, I can say, hey, let's do something else, right? Yeah. Like the failure state is hanging out with your friends. So that's a good place to be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it's not true for everybody who's GMing games. Mm-hmm. But for me, and it sounds like for you, Chris, by far the vast majority of my gaming has been basically an excuse to hang out with people I already like and who mm-hmm. I know and trust, more or less, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like you say, the worst case scenario, you know, is that you still have fun with your friends, but you have fun with your friends over a game that's maybe not amazing, but that's still a fun and, you know, time with your friends. So I do know a good number of GMs though that run, you know, not for friends, but they run the game in the local game store each week or mm-hmm. In the local game club, and I don't do that, and I don't. I mean, I admire those people, the ability to do that, but also it's just like, I don't think that could be for me.
It's interesting you say that, because like I'm agreeing with you, I'm like nodding and stuff, and then I'm thinking about the Ann Arbor District Library's RPG Fest that we did.
Yeah.
And that was essentially running games for strangers, and I had a blast.
Yes, I love that. Like that is, right? I love running games for strangers. Conventions, that thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Like I would never choose to go to Vault of Midnight and run Adventures League or something like that. But like doing that occasionally is pretty motivating, right? And like, especially like getting to introduce brand new people to the game and things like that is really great.
Have either of you guys ever either done this or thought about like volunteering to be like a sort of brand ambassador or, you know, for role-playing companies? Because most role-playing companies do have some sort of organized way in which you can be a GM who, like, you know, runs demos and things like that for the game. Have you guys done that, or like, does that sound exciting or not at all?
I did try it once, and the reasons I stopped doing it actually had nothing to do with that activity. It was the system they had set up to do it. I don't know if the company still exists. It was a company called Double Exposure, and you could go and you would get certified in a game. They did both board games and RPGs. And I got certified in Green Ronin's Fantasy Age, nice. Dragon Age, and did run it at a couple of conventions as technically a representative. And then also when Keith Baker released Phoenix Dawn Command and was sort of recruiting people, you know, I signed up and he sent me swag and stuff to hand out to players, and I did run that at a couple of conventions too. So I have tried that, and it was a pretty good experience. The first time my Double Exposure issues, they were more focused on board games, so I kept getting all these emails about board game stuff, yeah. and they tried to gamify it too, which was kind of fun, but like you had to run so many hours and then you could get free stuff, and I wasn't into that. The game was good, and I enjoyed that. And then with the Keith Baker Phoenix Dawn Command thing, he just ran out of steam. That game didn't take off like he hoped, and he's just not promoting it anymore. But I did that. I guess I've done that twice, and I really enjoyed that experience. And I would do it again in the right circumstance.
Okay.
So, John, that's like kind of a professional way to run a game, right? Like you are a official representative of the game at that point. Did you feel like that changed the way that you approached running it? I mean, like we're talking about motivation, right? Like, so your motivation is a little different at this point.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I was excited to run it and introduce these games to people. And I feel like, especially with the Phoenix Dawn Command experience, it did change the experience a little bit. I felt like I was really promoting the game more rather than my play style. And I wonder if the game was not quite as good because of that. Because I had a couple good experiences running that game, but I had a couple experiences that were not great. So, yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah. I think maybe it did mix my motivations a little bit. Yeah, that's interesting.
What would you guys do in a situation like this, where you're the GM and you're just not feeling it? And let's say over the course of several game sessions, you find your enthusiasm just waning, and it's been a long time since you've thought, hooray, it's game time, I can't wait to go and run this game. At what point do you put up a flag and say, oh, there's a problem here, we got to figure it out? What do you do if the players are still soon to be enjoying it just fine? Like, at what point do you stop and say, maybe this is a bigger matter than just getting myself, hyped up for tonight's game?
towards the end of the campaign, my last D&D campaign that was wrapping up, I was losing enthusiasm for it again because we were transitioning to online, right? Like, so there's other stuff happening, but it was very much like a feeling of like, I need to wrap this up before I just like tell them I can't do it anymore, right? Like, because it was getting to the point where it's like, the story's kind of coming to a close. We've been going for a really long time. This big kind of cultural change is happening and stuff. And it was just like, it was a good time to sort of, get it wrapped up. And we've been talking about wrapping it up too for a little bit as well too, right? So it's like everything was coming to a head. Had at that point it'd been like, oh, but actually now we have 10 more sessions or something there. Like we would have had to sit down and be like, okay, like
if I recall, that was the game that wouldn't end, right? Like you're like, come on guys, let's get to it. And they just wouldn't.
It kept on like, just like one more session. And like part of that's my fault, right? But part of that, all of that's my fault. But it's yeah. But I mean, I think it's again like going back to like you're playing with your friends. Like, I mean, could you imagine if you were getting paid to do it and like you had to show up? Like I think about that a lot with people doing one-shot podcasts and like actual plays and stuff. Like if you're not feeling it, but you also have like advertising money on the line, like that's a very different sort of.
Or if you're a Twitch streamer,
playing games,
right, and you're trying to get subscribers, and yeah.
There's a lot written about that too. But
I wonder if, in the course of making the decision that you were really going to wrap up the campaign, at least from my perspective, hearing about it, and you talked about it sometime on this show, and we interacted off the show about it, it sounded like a lot of cool stuff happened because of your decision to wrap up the campaign, right? Yeah. Because you had all these, how can we wrap this up well? What, how are we going to pull this all together? How can we send the campaign off? I wonder if maybe by deciding it's time to wrap up this game, you actually got kind of an injection of excitement because it presents a whole kind of an exciting new round of questions that you need to figure out and solve.
Yeah, and this, I'm going to stop myself from opening this up into a tangent that will go for another hour. But, yeah, I have a lot to say about this, but I've been thinking quite a bit about pacing just as a general sort of thing in like movies and TV and games and things like that. But I think you're absolutely right. When you have that sort of like devil may care, like this could end at any second sort of sensation at the table, like that really changes sort of the energy of what you're willing to present to them. Because, so I was running Horde of the Dragon Queen, and I was not very inspired by the general Horde of the Dragon Queen arc. So I was just skipping chapters, basically. Right? Like there'd be 20 pages. It's just like, well, that's very cool, but I don't really want to explore the interpersonal politics between these two clans and the swamp lands, right? Like we're just going to kind of do away with that and just get straight to the dragon, right? Because that's what we're doing.
Yeah, right.
As we're going through it, and then it makes it kind of a stronger story at that point, right? Because then you're just sort of focused on, a little bit more of the high points rather than maybe some of the stuff that's not as interesting to you as the GM or to the people, the players at the table.
I've been thinking about it since we started this topic, and the story I'll tell is I was running a campaign. This was, so I had not run RPGs for a long time. I decided, I really want to do this again, and I'd gone back to run old games. I think we talked about this in the past, but it started off as a session of Rollmaster and then switched to a Dragon Quest game, and I ran that for a while. And that game I eventually got tired of running. I would come to the table and I wouldn't want to run anymore. That also ended up switching into a couple, 2-3 year 3.5 campaign in which I gave up GMing and became a player. And I think that entire arc from coming back into role-playing games and getting tired of that Dragon Quest game, and then eventually getting really tired of that 3.5 game. God bless everybody in it. If anyone's listening, that's not a personal attack. But realizing that I didn't want to play the way we were playing, right? And I think it took me a long time to just admit to myself that there were other options. And what I really needed to do was explore those other options. Because I think I still love the idea of a role-playing game, but I got tired of that one. And that style, that sort of quote-unquote classic D&D style. Certainly the 3.5 high mechanic, feat-oriented, optimal build kind of stuff. And I think I just didn't feel very successful. And so I think that when you don't feel successful, it's not very fun. So I think that was a big big contributor to my lack of motivation and sort of switching gears there. So I don't know if that was just babbling or that makes that story more clear, but I think that that it was a not playing to my strengths kind of thing too. I have some strengths and they're not in that kind of game. So I think that's why I switched and have not looked back.
It's a good reminder that when we talk about not being enthused or not able to drum up excitement for running a game, there's a number of different reasons, and it's probably worth pausing to think, is it because I'm stressed right now and life is busy and this will pass in a few weeks? Or is it something more significant, like this just fundamentally isn't the kind of game experience that I enjoy having, which sounds like that was the conversation you had with yourself, John.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes I will come to the table and I'm not motivated, and then it's always, I think it goes back to the hanging out thing. For example, I've had times when I got together with people and we're like, you know what, let's just play Fiasco instead of this prepared session we've had. And Fiasco is great because you just pick a scenario and characters and you're off to the races.
That's interesting. Something I've been toying with, and I'm sure we've talked about it at some point, is is there like a really good system that you could get down enough that when people show up for game night, you could play a board game or you could play D&D Light or whatever it is, and it's like, you can go from not playing to playing in 10 minutes and then stop in an hour sort of thing, right?
Right.
Because I think there's something nice about like having a system like that, like, oh, like let's play D&D, but also you are not signing up for 6 months of D&D.
Right.
We're just playing tonight and that's okay. But like, I don't know how to quite do that myself. And maybe it's just like, I haven't found the right system or whatever. But like, I think, like we're talking about like motivation and stuff, a lot of it's going back to prep. And it's like, yeah, if you could just have that in your back pocket at all times, so that we could just play this, right? Like, and we can just go.
Right.
So there's kind of two elements to that. You would want a game that can easily be run quickly, right? And I think that there's more support for that kind of game now than there was maybe 15 or 20 years ago, as far as games written to be picked up quickly. But then there's the other half of that is, finding that game or that activity that everybody you're definitely going to have fun with, right? That everybody knows well enough that they can slide right into that activity.
Yeah, it's almost, I think about like parlor games. Like, I don't play parlor games, right? Like, but that whole idea of like, oh, let's play, whatever, crumpets and tea, like, right? And like everybody just like sort of knows how to play that game, and like everybody's having this
let's play charades
time. Yeah, right. Like something along those lines, but sort of fits that like RPG-ish niche.
Yeah.
I've always had this vision where I would, and I've never got it quite to work out though I've come close, where you have a group of people and you'd sort of say, it's game night, whoever wants to join can join, and we'll play whatever. We'll decide what to play when we get there. So if the right mixture of people is there, we'll play that campaign we were playing last week, and if there's not, we'll start something new, or we'll have multiple campaigns going, and we'll let whoever wants to run, or we'll just play Fiasco because we don't have the right people, or whatever. I always thought that would be a fun idea, but I've never fully explored it. I've gotten a group together that for a while we were trying out new games, and I'd say, hey, I'm going to run this thing at this time. And since the pandemic, that hasn't really been a thing, but just sort of a looser group that isn't committed to anything. But that does require a lot of prep, because you've got to learn a new game every time you want to change it around.
Yeah.
And there's also this sense that, most RPGs really are intended to be played out, over a long period of time. And so, yes, we've all run one-shots and we recognize the fun of a good one-shot. There is that sense that the one-shot is the thing you do, like when it's like a lesser option compared, what everyone wants, what every GM wants to do is run like a killer, 6-month campaign. And so running a one-shot is fun, but it also feels like maybe I'm not realizing like the potential of this game system. And now I think there are more games that are designed to be played and to have a definite start and a definite end point within like an evening's worth of play. But I personally don't know too many of those games well myself. And so that sounds really fun, and I don't know what I would bring to the table in that situation.
And I guess I'll say one other thing about staying motivated, and I think you and I have had this conversation, Andy, before, if not here online. One of the things that keeps me motivated is just trying new games. I find that once I've played a game for a while, I don't want to play it anymore. And it's a rare game that I just keep sticking with, right? And that's a pretty rare. So I motivate myself by trying different games all the time.
It seems like the things we're talking about, it's like there's like novelty and like mastery are two pretty important things. It's like it's fun to play games that are novel until the point that you can master them, and then it's fun to play them, like, well, you feel like you have mastery over them until the point where there's kind of like no novelty left. And then, like, the motivation has to switch again because, maybe you need to pick up something new or, whatever. Or you've sort of told the story like that. Yeah, I think it's like for GMs, I think if you can kind of thread that needle of, like, this is new and interesting and, like, I feel like I can do it and all that, like, then that's very motivating, at least to me.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. Like, I think about that a lot. And I think when you say it like that, that's one of the reasons I like the Powered by the Apocalypse games so much. Because if you played one of them, you can pick up another one pretty easily. But there's so many of them, you could do Saga of the Icelanders one night and Monster of the Week the next night.
Yeah.
And have some skill with the game and understand enough to play. I think that's why that appeals to me, because it appeals to both things. Because I feel like I have mastery of Powered by the Apocalypse games now, but I can still find novel genre experiences within that group of games. That's really interesting.
Do you guys find that, like, going online or immersing yourself in sort of the online RPG world, like Twitter or forums or listening to podcasts, does that help your enthusiasm level? Would you ever consciously think, I'm not feeling it this week, I'm going to go, I'm going to go out there on Twitter, I'm going to fire up a couple podcasts, and does that help? And do you have any, like, suggestions of things that you find inspiring?
I do. The times I jump into actual plays, I do find them generally, like, motivating in that it helps me sort of think through, like, oh, like, I would have approached this setup a little bit differently, or like, oh, I would have never thought of that. Those sorts of things. So it's nice for sort of opening up the possibility space for me of, like, oh, okay, there's different ways that, you could play these games. Yeah, that said, I mean, yeah, I don't really go out and seek them too much. It's mostly a time thing, really. It's like, I don't... if I'm going to be devoting any time to doing gaming-related thought, like, I have plenty of stuff that I should be doing or could be doing.
I don't do it too much. I used to listen to actual plays, like we talked about that campaign podcast. I listened to the Adventure Zone religiously for their first 2 arcs, and I did find that inspiring from a podcast standpoint. As far as forums and websites, first of all, Andy, first rule of the internet is don't go on Twitter for any kind of inspiration.
Yeah.
But also,
if you're listening to this and you're thinking about going to Twitter, please stop.
Please stop. As far as forums go, I get kind of overwhelmed. Like I'm on a couple of Discords with friends, small groups of people who we enjoy chatting about games. I find that way more inspiring than trying to get into like there's a Discord for Mothership, and everybody's great over there, but I don't know anybody, and so I just didn't really enjoy being there. Not because of the place; it's actually a great place. But because I couldn't find any hooks, right? I couldn't find any handholds to get in. Whereas if it's a smaller group of people, I'll enjoy RPG chat, and that will definitely inspire me to see what other people are doing.
Chris, as you when you get close to running that Cyberpunk game, I know it will be a real source of enthusiasm. Is I want you to go on to any forum where they're discussing Shadowrun, and where they will be inevitably arguing about which version of their beloved game they hate the most. I think that would be very inspiring for you.
It's like what is arguing what's the worst Star Wars movie, right? Like it's
That's right.
They're all terrible.
Yeah.
So I have one other quick question. Have either of you guys been in games, or would you like to be in a game where you could say, you know what, I'm not feeling it right now. Can somebody else take over GMing for 2 weeks while I just recharge my creative batteries? Have you done that?
I've thought about this a lot. I think I'm just too much of a control freak when it comes down to it. Yeah, which is weird because, like, I really enjoy playing in other people's games quite a bit when I can. But I think, like, if it's a group that I'm sort of running, I would feel like such, like, jealousy. which means that I should try this and get over it. But it's just like, I don't know, like, because part of like running games, I feel like is a little bit like you put the group together, you got the group together, you're running it, you're the one sort of like pushing it through, and it's going. So to step back and be like, oh well, someone else take over for a little bit, I think I'd feel sheepish about that.
Yeah, the one
this
time
is GM confessional.
Yeah, the one time I did that, I didn't end up GMing again for like 2 years. So
okay. See?
Okay, well, hey, does anybody have any sort of parting thoughts on this topic that you haven't got a chance to voice?
The one thing I'll say is that if you're not feeling motivated to run your game, do take a moment and don't beat yourself up about it. See if there's something in the game that's really bothering you. Maybe it's a player who's exhibiting behavior that you just don't feel like facing that night. And if that's the case, can you talk to that player? Or is it, are you tired of the game? There's usually a good reason for it. And if you take some time to reflect, you should be able to find out.
Okay, well, looking ahead over the next couple of weeks, can I ask what you guys have on your radar gaming-wise?
I'm going to crack one of those cyberpunk books, I swear.
Yeah, that's great.
It'll happen.
I am all set to go to run a couple of Call of Cthulhu short games I would like to run for my wife and daughter. I found on the Call of Cthulhu website a couple of good convention adventures that are intended to be played in like 1 to 2 hours. So
nice.
Like the idea of an adventure meant to be run in an hour is really intriguing to me. So they're all pretty much just one location adventures, and we've talked a lot about running games in the like 2-ish hour range. But Chris, except for you, I don't know anyone who's ever tried to run games in a 1 hour, that lunch hour time slot. So I'm going to try to run those. I was hoping to have done that today, in fact, but it didn't work out. But
I'm going to want to play in one of those, that sounds fun.
So if it goes well, one of the reasons I was excited is if it goes well, I feel much more comfortable like saying, hey guys, you want to go online real quick and just play Call of Cthulhu for an hour. That seems a lot less intimidating to me than like, all right, who wants to like next month meet up and start an online Cthulhu game? I don't know. One of those sounds like a lot of work that will never happen, and the other sounds like something that could plausibly happen on short notice. So.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that sounds like it could happen like this week.
I know, like I could almost say, do you guys want to hang on after this recording and play a quick 1 hour Call of Cthulhu game? But,
I would say no.
He would say no because he has a baby.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I'm waiting to get my campaign back on track until the game I'm playing in is over, because it's the same, some of the same players and the same time slot. And I think Steve has a sort of idea he wants to play 2 or 3 more times and then kind of wrap it up. So I'm going to let that happen and then see where we are.
All right. Well, this has been Roll for Topic. Chris, it has certainly been a lot of fun having you back on. Can you give us any hints that is your return imminent, or are you still, to whatever extent you feel comfortable saying, are you staying super busy? Are you ready to kind of reemerge into the podcast and to the gaming world a bit? What's going on with you?
Yeah. So I mean the baby's like 5 weeks old. It's doing really well. So I think it's sort of like a schedule permitting thing at this point. But yeah, I think I'm ready to get back into normal life, whatever life is these days.
So, the current version of normal life.
Yes. So I don't think you're. I think I will be back next time too.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, guys, it's been really good talking with you. I have been Andy Rao.
I've been John Corey.
I'm Chris Salzman.
Yeah, Chris, we've been missing you, but we need you to say your closing one-liner here.
Yeah.
This is like, what do you think I remember?
That's right. Do you need do you need me to send you your closing one?
Yeah. Remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.
Yay!
Indeed you are.